Hey folks, Colin here from Sumthins Recording, and today I want to show you how to mix a little indie rock drum kit. We're going to be going over snare drum, overhead, so it's going to have a tambourine, and toms. We're not going to be doing any kick drum today. We're going to be mixing some indie rock drums today, but before we dive in, if you are ready to go a little bit deeper into the mixing process in its entirety and really start to hone your workflow as an engineer, then I have just the thing for you. It is my 7-step mixing checklist, and it's just a simple PDF that will walk you through the entire mixing process step by step to help you get professional and radio-ready mixes without any more of the hassle and without any more of the guesswork. It is a completely free guide, and you can download it below using the link in the video description. Now let's jump in here and take a look at these drums. So as I mentioned, we've got snare drum, and then we've got an overhead here. The overhead has a little bit of tambourine in it and a little bit of floor tom in it as well. There's no kick drum on this kit, so just snare drum and overheads. We're going to start here with our snare drum. So let's pull up our snare drum and see what we got here. So our snare drum's pretty transient looking. Even if you just look at it, you can see these notes are pretty sharp looking. A lot of transient power there, all the way across the board it looks like. So I think the first thing we're going to do is put a limiter on this just to kind of pull it in line a little bit and make sure it's not too crazy transient wise. Let's see where it's jumping up to. This seems like a good section. We've got a couple of loud notes out here. Let's make sure those are okay. So it looks like if we go down to like not negative 89, negative 9, we should be sitting somewhere around 3 dB of reduction. Let's see here. That's not sounding bad there. So negative 9, we're getting about 3 dB of reduction or so, a little bit over, sometimes a little bit less. It's about where I want to be sitting with this drum, just to kind of level it out a little bit. You can see it doesn't get too crazy up and down volume-wise. Let's make sure the end here is okay, but I don't want those peaks to be so crazy and to jump out so much. So let's listen through our end here, make sure we're okay with our limiter. Yep, that looks perfect. Cool. Now we can move on to some EQ, some compression, and maybe a little bit more limiting depending on what we end up getting when we boost. If we boost too much top end with our EQ or too much low end, too much of the fundamental, that transient might jump back out front. So I don't want it to be too sharp, especially with a chiller song like this. It's kind of on the indie folk side, especially with a smaller kit like this. You don't want the snare to be too transient or too sharp attack-wise. Let's pull in our EQ here and see what we can get. And we'll also start setting our level here now that we have a limiter in to take care of things. Just a little bit out here at about 387, there was some ringing going on, but you can see our fundamentals sitting right here around 200, so we don't want to go too far. Maybe tighten this up a little bit. I'm just trying to find just that ringing, but I couldn't get it. There it is. Perfect. That sounds much better. Now I want to throw compression on before I start boosting. So we can get rid of some of what we don't need there with the EQ. You can see I put in a high pass filter, rolled it up to about 90 hertz. I didn't want to go too far. We could have gone up a little bit further with it and maybe added low end back later after the compression. But I'm going to stick here for the moment and let some of that low end breathe even with the compression. So here we got that really sharp transient. So we're going to make our attack a little bit faster. We could probably leave our release set at least so it lets go before our next snare hit. Maybe around 80. A little quicker. That's feeling really nice right there. So a good trick with compression, if you're not sure where to set your attack and release, is if you pull your threshold down quite a bit, so it's doing a lot of compression, you can kind of watch your meter. If you're not that good with your ear yet, if you can't hear it that well, watch your meter and set your attack and release. So crank your threshold so you're doing a ton of compression, and then you can see visually what your attack and release are doing. So you can set them in time with your drum, which is nice, especially setting the release. You can usually hear the attack as you pull that up. You'll hear how fast it starts working on the drum. But release, it can be so much nicer to see it and then hear it breathe rather than just trying to hear your release working with the drum. That's sounding pretty good there. We're at a 3-to-1 ratio, so not too aggressive, but not too gentle at the same time. We're at 21 milliseconds for attack, so a little bit quicker than where I had it starting at 30 milliseconds. And then we pulled the release up to 70 milliseconds, so let's go on these doubles before our next hit. Let's listen one more time without it and with. To me, that tightens up the snare drum quite a bit, and it preserves the attack without getting too crazy about it. So we get some nice transient, some nice attack on the front end, but our attack is quick enough that it's not really sharp and it's not taking over the entire sound of the drum. Now let's go back and see if we can get some top end, some clarity on it. That's feeling really good right there. So we've got a nice huge boost at 8K. Drums is all, for me at least, on drums, 8K is always a nice starting point to boost if you're looking for air, for click on the kick drum, for that sizzle on the top of your snare drum. 8K is a great place to start to give it a nice top end lift. So that's feeling good there. Let's move down to this 3K boost and see what we can get here. Just a little bit there. I moved it down to about 2.63K, and just a little lift helps the drum feel fuller in the top end. So it's not just so airy. We get a little bit lower on the high end, a little bit lower on the top end of the frequency range to beef up that attack a little bit. So it's not just a bunch of air. I want to come down in the mid-range here, and then a little low boost we'll probably do afterwards. right there at about 1.18K. Let's add some mid-range here. That feels nice. That helps to round out the sound overall. Otherwise, when we boost our low end, then we'll have that kind of smile curve. We don't want that, especially with just a snare drum on this smaller kit. The snare has to feel full range. So, couple boosts here on our EQ. Again, bear in mind, these are going into the compressor. So we've got a big top end boost here. That's giving us all our air, that nice sizzle on the top end. A boost here at about 2.5K. That's giving us a little bit more of that attack and making it feel fuller. And then here we're rounding out the sound overall with a boost in the mid-range to bring it up a little bit. Let's see how our compressor's doing, and then we'll move on to some low boosting afterwards. So right there, sometimes with snare drum, especially in this instance where there's no kick drum, I'd rather boost lower than the fundamental and bring up more low end overall than boost at the fundamental and risk boosting some of this low mid area. So I'm going to stay at 142 here. You can see where our fundamental is around the 200 hertz area. So I'm going to boost underneath it, bring up some of that fundamental, and then bring up some of that lower octave as well. That's feeling really, really good there. So we're doing about 5.28 dB at 142 hertz. You can see how wide our band is here. So our fundamental's sitting a little bit above 200 here. We're getting a little bit of a boost there. Nice big boost here at 142, about 150. And then we've got a nice slope here, a gentle slope on the downside, bringing up some of that lower octave underneath, which is nice. That gives you a nice beefy snare drum sound. It can also be nice if you do have a kick drum as well, because you'll get some of that kick energy coming in on your snare drum. It can add a little bit of that lower octave to your snare drum as well, to your kick drum, which is really, really nice. So sometimes it's nicer to boost a little bit lower than the fundamental on your snare drum. So you get some of that fundamental coming up, but you also get some of that lower octave to add some extra beef to your snare drum. That's feeling good on the snare drum. We'll make sure one more time that the level's good, that we don't need any more top end, and we'll move on to the overheads. So just a little touch more at the top end. Moved it up to 9.12 dB at 8K. Feeling good there. I'm going to take a listen to our overheads by themselves first. And then we'll start mixing them with the snare top here. I don't think we need any limiting there. You can hear it sounds pretty full, and you can see our transient aren't too sharp. They're more rounded, which is nice. It's pretty beefy sounding, pretty low midly sounding. Let's take care of some of that before we move forward here. Okay, so a couple moves here on our overhead so far. Big cut at 362 hertz. That's where all that low-mid mud was sitting. It was sounding very, very heavy in that low-mid area. Pulled that out, you could hear how the top end opened up on our overheads as we got rid of all of that energy in the low mid area, made room for everything else. Little high pass here, pulled it up to 114. We don't need any of that here. There's no kick drum. We're getting all of our main low energy for our snare drum coming from our actual snare drum mic. I pulled up the low pass here a little bit. The super, super highs were a little bit harsh, a little bit edgy, so I'm rolling that in a little bit. We're going to listen one more time. Okay, so a little boost here at 3K. If you're mixing tambourine, 3K is the tambourine frequency. It's the shaker frequency too. It gives you that rock and roll tambourine shaker sound. So a little bit of this. I normally wouldn't boost this area on overheads, but it's sounding good with the snare and with the tambourine. It's okay on the cymbals, but that's the balance we're going to have to take here. I don't know if I want to do any compression, but let's actually try some compression. Let's try... let's see here. Let's try the Fairchild. That might give us some nice vintage vibe here. Just a little touch of compression there. Almost 3 dB, about 1.5 dB compression. I pulled this back here. It was feeling, once I put the compressor on, it was feeling really, really energy driven in the high mid area here. It felt too mid-rangey. I wasn't digging that, so I pulled it back from about 2.5 dB to about a dB boost there at 3K. That's feeling good. Let's mix this in with our snare drum here, and we'll have to check our phase and everything now that we've put all our plugins on. Okay, so there's our tom. I don't know if I want to leave that low end energy, and we're going to try something here on this. We're going to duplicate this completely. And what we're going to do, just for the toms area here, is use just the low end, I think. So we'll get rid of that. Default this, not drums, default. Take a listen here. So that shouldn't change anything too much when it's not there. And we can always cut this track out when it's not there. Now let's flip back over here, and we're going to switch this to 24 dB per octave. That's feeling really good. Now we can pull up the low end on our floor tom a little bit farther. So we'll call this floor tom we can pull up that low end on our floor tom a little bit further without having to add low end to our overheads overall. So that would add low end to the tambourine, to all the cymbal mics, and it would add it to the snare drum coming through on our overheads. I don't want low end on our snare drum coming through on our overheads. I want that to come just from the snare mic. So let's listen one more time here. And I want to see if we can pan the floor tom a little bit without it getting too crazy, because I know this is just the low end. So let's see how it sounds. No, I'd rather keep that up the middle. Let's take a listen one more time through that area. So our snare was in phase, so we didn't need to flip the phase there. That's feeling really good there. So let's do a little bit of review here of what we've covered. So for our snare drum, a little bit of limiting just to reduce that really sharp transient we have on our snare drum. Then our EQ, we got rid of what we didn't need first, so a little bit of ringing, rolled off the super, super lows. Then our compressor, faster attack, again to take care of that sharp transient. Faster release, so it lets go during these doubles before our next hit, doing about 6 dB of compression. Then we came back and did our 3 boosts. So top end air, some of that crispness. This helped our attack a little bit to help the snare cut through. Then a little bit of mid-range to make our snare drum feel full overall across the frequency spectrum. Then we came afterwards to boost up our low end. That gave us our lower octave because we're boosting a little bit underneath the fundamental. Then we came over to our overheads here. A little bit of EQ here. Big cut in the low mids at 362. That's getting rid of all that heaviness, all that muddiness. We made our high pass filter a little bit more aggressive at 24 dB per octave, pulled it up to 138. That's because we're separating the low end and the top end in our overheads to get some beef on our floor tom. Touch of a boost here at 3K to bring out that tambourine, and then rolling off some of the super, super high so it's not so aggressive, so harsh. Just a little bit of compression here with this Fairchild. I like the vibe it added, while still giving a little bit of compression, some evenness. Then we have our floor tom, so this is a duplication of our overhead track, and we're isolating just the low end, everything below 115, and we're boosting it at 70 to get some low end, some energy from our floor tom. And that is our little indie kind of folk rock drum mix. I hope that was interesting for you. I hope it was helpful to see how I would attack a smaller drum kit like this with very few elements, very sparse sounding. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you're ready to level up your mixes and really start dialing in your workflow as an engineer, then I have just the tool for you, and it is completely free. It is my 7-step mixing checklist, and you can download it below to start creating more professional mixes in less time. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.